Good evening, everyone. I'd welcome you to the City of Lebanon Plan Commission meeting on November 21st. First thing we'll do is call the meeting to order. And if you intend to speak this evening, be sure you may use your name and address or sign in over here, okay? When you speak, when we get to you, okay? First item is the roll call this morning.
John Lastly.
Here.
Dan Bayshore.
Here.
Kevin Krulik.
Here.
Corey Coots.
Here.
Keith Campbell.
Here.
Ashley Paddock.
Here.
Brian Tandy.
Here.
Ellie Mullen.
Here.
Lori Gross.
Here.
Okay. We have a motion for the approval of the minutes. Everyone's had a chance to see them, I suppose.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as written.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
John Lastly.
Aye.
Dan Bayshore.
Aye.
Kevin Krulik.
Aye.
Corey Coots.
Abstain.
Keith Campbell.
Aye.
Ashley Paddock. Aye. Brian Tandy.
Aye.
Allie Mullen.
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Okay.
Aye.
Now, yeah. Okay, we'll start with the new business. First item on the docket is docket number 26-61. Alex and Kim Andrews requesting vacation of a portion of a public platted alleyway in the Ann M. Williams Second Edition plat. The property address of the applicants is 623 East Main Street. The alleyway in question is to the east of their parcel. Kevin?
Good evening, Commission. Just a little housekeeping. I know, Keith, you touched on earlier about giving name and address. Council members, please make sure you speak into your microphones with a full room. And then if anybody comes up to speak, make sure you adjust the mic so that everybody here at home and in the other room can hear you. So just wanted to pass that along. As Keith mentioned, the first item tonight is a right-of-way vacation request from an applicant. We'll have a couple of those tonight. And just a reminder to you of the process on those. Tonight, we'll talk about the justifications and the application of the vacation request. That you will make a recommendation to the Common Council, then the Council will take it up at their next regularly scheduled meeting, and we'll vote on it whether to accept or to approve that vacation request or not. So tonight, we're presenting it to you for your recommendation. And if we want to go ahead and pull up the screen, as Keith mentioned, this is a right-of-way request over on the near east side of Lebanon, of downtown. 623 East Main Street is the property highlighted here in black. To the east of that is a 50-foot right-of-way dedicated to Ann Street. Main Street is to the north here. Ann Street runs north-south through here. But Ann Street was never a public road through here and will never become a public road simply because it does not access or lead to another public street. The property owner here at 623 is looking to build an accessory structure on this property, and in order to accommodate and meet all the necessary setbacks in the zoning district, has requested a 20-foot vacation of right-of-way along the east side of the property here. So I'll pull up the overview here, and you can kind of see there's the existing home at 623. Then we have the 50-foot right-of-way. The 20 feet is then identified along this line and then angles back to meet at the southeast corner of 623 Main Street. So the request is for a 20-foot alley vacation, a right-of-way vacation, which would leave 30 feet for the existing alley, which is more than sufficient for an alley, which typically alleys are 16 to 17 feet platted. So 30 feet still leaves more than enough room for any potential maintenance on this particular parcel. So in reviewing the applicant's vacation request, we do have a technical advisory committee review. So got a handful of people in the room, including Lebanon Utilities. Lebanon Utilities comments from Sewer and Water Division. There are currently no water or sewer utilities located within the subject rights-of-way that would be impacted by this vacation request. The Electrical Division, there are no electric facilities that would be impacted by the vacation request. The City of Lebanon Fire Department had no issues with the vacation request, as they typically don't use alleys when accessing any properties. And then lastly, the City of Lebanon Street Department had no issues with this vacation request. So in review of the submitted request for vacation of the 20 feet of right-of-way associated with Ann Street, per the exhibit that was shown, the Lebanon Planning staff recommends forwarding the vacation request to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions, should anybody have any.
Questions for Matt? Would the applicant come forward, please? Is the applicant here?
Good evening.
Good
How are
evening.
you all tonight?
Well, you can say what
State
you'd
your
like to
name.
do.
Alex Andrews
Right.
and my
And
wife
then
Kim.
Let us know what else, we didn't bring it up to you. So you have a right to speak to it, okay?
Okay. Well, I mean, it's, to us, it's kind of fairly cut and dry as far as the need for it. The parcel in question, it's been in my family, that house I was born and raised in, and it just seems like a I don't know, for lack of a better word, common sense aspect of right of way to that alley / street of our need to add a garage to that property. So, did you have anything to say? Okay.
Okay, anyone on the board have a question for the applicant?
Gonna be a one or two-car garage?
Two-car?
Two-car.
Any other questions? Okay. Appreciate, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I would entertain a motion. Or we'd have public hearing, I'm sorry. Anyone else come to forward and speak on this issue? On this only? Okay, not see anyone walking toward the mic. I'll close the public hearing, and then I'll ask for a motion.
I'd motion to send docket 22-61 to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
John Leslie,
Yes.
Dan Bayshore,
Yes.
Kevin Krulik,
Aye.
Corey Kuntz,
Yes.
Keith Campbell,
Yes,
Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Ally Mullen. Yes. Lori Gross.
Yes.
okay. Next item is docket number 22-68. David Gilman requesting vacation of the portion of public platted Superior Street between Ryan Street and Coombs Street in the Halls Addition subdivision. Matt?
And just real quick, another little housekeeping item, docket number 2267, Arbor Homes, with their primary plat application. That docket has been withdrawn by the applicant. So if you're here for docket 2267, Arbor Homes, that will not be presented this evening. So jumping into the second vacation request of the evening, again, tonight is a presentation to you for your recommendation to the Common Council. The Common Council will take it up at their next regularly scheduled meeting. This is a similar request. We pull up the screen here. This is Superior Street, running east-west through the middle of the screen, with Coombs Street on the west and Ryan Street on the right. The parcel, or the part of the property that is highlighted in yellow here, is formerly the Interurban Railroad. That's where the Interurban Railroad used to run through there. That railroad has since been vacated and was dedicated back to the Superior Street right-of-way. So now, from the Interurban Railway to the southern part of the right-of-way for Superior Street, we have 66 feet of right-of-way, which, as I mentioned in the previous one, typically 16 to 17 feet per alley, maybe 20 feet for a street per lane is more than suitable. So 66 feet is quite a bit here. The applicant owns the properties to the north here, the 4 parcels here, and are looking to develop 5 single-family detached homes on these lots. And in order to properly get those in there, meet all the setbacks, they are requesting for a vacation of the 18 feet that was formerly the interurban rail system here. So they are requesting vacation of the yellow portion through the center here. Again, 18 feet out of the 66, leaving 48 feet of right-of-way for Superior Street. That would be more than sufficient for the improvements that would be necessary to develop single-family residential next to this, including widening of the street, adding sidewalks to both north and south side of Superior Street. So that 48th Street, more than enough accounts for it. So as with the previous one, we did have a technical advisory committee review. City of Lebanon Utilities Sewer and Water Division. There is a sanitary sewer. Let me pull up the next image here, and might have to zoom in a little bit more for you to see it. But running along through the 18 feet of interurban rail, you can see where it says sand through there, the dotted black line. That is a sanitary sewer line. So City of Lebanon Utilities did identify that sanitary sewer line running in through that proposed right-of-way, and has requested a 20-foot easement be recorded when the property owner plats or replats the lots, so that they can provide sufficient enough area for maintenance of this sanitary sewer line. The electrical division of Lebanon Utilities indicated that there are no electric facilities that would be impacted by the vacation request. The Lebanon Fire Department had no issues with the request, and neither did the City of Lebanon Street Department. So in review of the submitted request for the vacation of 18 feet of right-of-way associated with Superior Street per the exhibits, Lebanon Planning Staff recommends forwarding the recommendation to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation subject to the following condition: that the applicant record a 20-foot easement within the vacated right-of-way area to accommodate the existing sanitary sewer line. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. Okay, would the applicant come forward, please?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is David Gilman. My address is 211 South Ritter Avenue, Suite H, Indianapolis 46219. I do represent the owner of the property. We're in agreement with the staff recommendation and the TAC review recommendation to dedicate the 18-foot of vacated right-of-way for the sanitary sewer easement that exists. We would appreciate your favorable recommendation to the Common Council, and then we'll be back for a minor plat approval before this board. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone here have questions for the applicant? Okay. I'll now open up the public hearing. Anyone want to come speak on this issue? Okay. Name and address, please.
My name is Brian Spanhook, and I live in at 701 West Pearl Street, which is right behind one of these units, one of these plots of land. We've gone over this a couple times. I've been up here with these, just trying to make sure that
Could you get a little closer to the microphone?
I'm just trying to make sure that I make my point heard, that they did say that they're going to turn Superior into a two-way street on this, because right now that road is probably about 9 feet wide, and it is a one-way road, and I can't even ride a bicycle with my daughter without getting run off the road. So is the city going to actually do the road, or is he in charge of trying to make this a two-lane road with sidewalks? Is really my biggest concerns. The question today is whether the council will vacate 18 feet by 256 feet long, 4 lots wide, 2 ME properties for free, or is it for the sale from the city, as we've probably all paid taxes on that land for 30-plus years. Right now, that road is a one-lane road, and are you going to make it into a two-lane road with sidewalks? This was train tracks at one point. like 25, 30 years ago that was abandoned, and they have chip sealed it with tar, and like I said, made a little temporary 9-foot strip through there. There is no sidewalks or anything around it.
No, but there will be I know there will be sidewalks there.
Okay,
That I do know.
okay. Maybe
Time's up, okay? Matt, you come forward, or Ben? No, hang on. Anyone else want to come and speak before they answer this? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the hearing. Okay, Matt?
I'll address a couple of those. The street improvements will be required. The City of Lebanon does have development standards, so when and if the property owners decide to develop these parcels into single-family homes, they will be required to make the necessary improvements, which would include the widening of Superior Street, as well as the addition of sidewalks throughout the area. As far as whether the property is being sold, there is no exchange of money. This is a vacation, which the city would be relinquishing ownership to the property owner. That property owner would then become responsible for the taxes associated with that 18 feet of right-of-way. So they would take over payment of any taxes that are applied to that land.
Any other questions?
Hey, Matt.
Yes,
So-
sir.
So to answer his question, or at least if I'm hearing his question, are you saying that it's going to be a two-way street, or are you saying it's going to just be improved? And improved, does that mean it's just going to be widened and still be just?
It will have to meet our city standards, which would, if there's single-family residential associated with it, it would have to be a two-way street.
Okay.
Kevin may be able to speak more specifically to the standards when and if, and again, this project would come back to this commission for development plan approval for the primary plat. So you would get to see the necessary improvements on it. This is, again, just vacation of this 18 feet of right-of-way.
Okay.
Kevin, do you?
Yeah, that's correct. The street would have to be widened to accommodate two-way traffic. Sidewalks would have to be added.
Okay. Want to make sure he got his question answered.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to forward the vacation request to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation, subject to the following condition, that the applicant record a 20-foot easement within the vacated right-of-way area to accommodate the existing sanitary sewer line.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
John Massley,
Yes?
Dan Bayshore,
Yes.
Kevin Krulik,
Yes.
Corey Coots,
No.
Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Ellie Mullen. Yes. Lori Gross.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carried. Okay. The next item is docket number 2269. David Klein requesting rezoning application for 5.7 acres located at 2620 North State Road 39 to a PUD, which is a planned unit development. Matt?
All right. This is another application, a little bit different from a vacation request, but again, tonight, we're looking for your recommendation to the Common Council. So the applicant has requested a rezone to planned unit development, or PUD, in order to develop the subject property as an infill project. If we can pull up the slide here. So in yellow, we can see the subject property in question. We are on North State Road 39, directly across the street from Witham Hospital. The applicant is proposing an infill project of 70 townhomes, single-family attached townhome product for a residential development across from Witham. The concept plan has been submitted, and we'll go through those exhibits here in a moment and highlight those, including the road and unit layout, conceptual architecture, and the landscape plan. The PUD rezone proposal does involve a request for an underlying zoning district of multifamily residential, or MF, and that establishes the permitted uses within the area, and then the rezone of the PUD identifies where the proposed development standards may vary from the base zoning district. So let me pull up the concept plan that the applicant has submitted here. Again, we've got State Road 39 running on the right side or the east side of this property. There is a single street cul-de-sac at the end with 12 buildings being proposed along the street. Associated parking with this, each of the units, and we'll get to that exhibit in a moment, will have a single-car garage as well as a driveway to accommodate 2 cars, so 3 vehicle parking off-street per unit. There's also associated guest parking towards the east side, towards the front, also along the pond, and also in the rear of the property along the cul-de-sac and the park area. The applicant is also proposing a walking path as an amenity that travels along the perimeter around the pond, as well as all the way around the proposed development. Landscaping was also submitted as part of the concept plan. It's kind of hard to see, but they are proposing trees and shrubbery between each driveway, trees and shrubbery between each of the buildings, and then also trees within the perimeter setback around the entire property along the northwest and south sides of the property. And we'll get some elevations here to better show the landscaping and the features, if I can. Zoom in a little bit more here for you. So as you can see, a little more modern, mid-century modern architecture, single-car garages, 2-car driveways with landscaping between each of the drives, as well as landscaping between the buildings. And then the architectural plan, sorry, let me go back up to that. The applicant is proposing to meet all the applicable architectural requirements, design requirements for the multifamily zoning district. Each unit will be 2 stories. Each unit will include a single-car garage and drive with space for 2 additional cars. Guest parking we've talked about. There will be no additional parking along the street other than in the identified areas, so that street will be free of cars parked in front of the units. The landscape plan we touched on, and the amenities we touched on. As part of the PUD ordinance request, the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, establishes 5 criteria that we have to review in order when we get an application for rezone and ordinance. The first consideration is the extent to which the proposal fulfills the requirement and intent of the comprehensive plan. The 2019 City of Lebanon Comprehensive Plan does identify this area contained in the proposal as commercial and mixed-density residential. The proposed development by the applicant fits within the definition of the mixed-density residential classification. Because the proposed site is long and narrow, and I can go back to that, it's long and narrow and has very small frontage along Lebanon Street. Commercial development is not ideal or suitable for a parcel like this. So infill development of mixed-family residential is the most likely development outcome on this property. The next consideration is the current conditions and character of the current structures and uses in the zoning district. The Onyx Point PUD is an area of the community that contains a mix of commercial, institutional, and a variety of residential uses. As you can see around it, we talked about there are multifamily to the north, there's some single family to the south, institutional with a hospital across the way, assisted living to the northeast, so a nice variety of uses in the area. And again, with a limited markability for commercial use, the proposal by the applicant for townhomes in this area represents the most desirable land use. The next is the conservation of the collective property values throughout the city of Lebanon as a whole. It's not anticipated that this development proposed by the applicant would have a negative impact on property values throughout the city. The proposal represents the high quality of design and should actually have positive impacts on values throughout the community. And then the last criteria to consider is responsible growth and development. The proposed site is an infill location across from Witham Hospital, and it's just north of our primary shopping centers for our community. So the site is served by existing utilities, thus it does represent responsible growth and development. So in review, our staff conclusion, in review of the submitted proposed planned unit development rezone and ordinance as presented, the Lebanon planning staff finds compliance with the UDO, established decisions criteria, and does recommend the Plan Commission for the planned unit development rezone and ordinance to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant
All right.
could go into some more
Anyone on the board
detail.
have a question for Matt? Okay, not hearing any. Would you ask the applicant to come forward, please?
Gotcha. Pull it up there.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name's David Klain. Address is 1905 South New Market Street in Carmel, Indiana. And we are here to ask for your favorable approval to move forward with our PUD that we have been working on with the town up to this point. A little bit about myself. See if I can, there you go. I'm a general contractor, real estate investor, I've been doing it for 29 years, and my father started his business of the same back in the late 70s, and so I've carried on the tradition of our family in the development, and proud to have both my sons, Brady and Mason, have now joined us for the third generation to be real estate developers and investors, and we're looking forward to becoming a part of the community in Lebanon. We have not done any development in Lebanon. We've primarily been doing Hamilton County, and we've also have some projects out in Brownsburg as well. My company does a variety of different real estate, and we've done luxury custom home building throughout the past 29 years. As you can see, everything kind of across the Hamilton County areas. Then we also own another division, Brayson Properties, which owns and manages and leases commercial and mixed-use buildings. We've built over 60,000 square feet of the mixed-use commercial buildings in the village of West Clay in Carmel. And within that, we manage and own a little over 40,000 square feet of those properties. And then as well, we have some office developments that we've done. It's called Link Office Suites. A little over 33,000 square foot building that provides a variety of different offices and sizing for co-working and community workspace. And then lastly, we've got another division that we own that built paired rental townhomes 22 years ago back in Brownsburg. And we still have those, and we still lease and maintain those. As you can see, I don't know if you can see on the pictures, if they're easy enough to see, but ultimately, we continue to maintain them with a great deal of pride and renovate them on a continued basis to increase values and help the market value of the properties and maintain the community that we're in. As far as our project, the Onyx Point, we've been very impressed with the growth that Lebanon has been having and the focus on how they are approaching it with quality of control and understanding of a good plan for the community, and we're very excited about that. And we want to be a part of the community, and we look forward to it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
Yes, I have a question. I'm just trying to look on the actual plans. There's actually a leasing office and a maintenance facility in the back of the,
In the rear there, we have, it's not a leasing office, that's actually just a little maintenance
Just a little maintenance.
facility for us to be able to house equipment that might be needed to help maintain the community. And then we have a park area back there that we plan on having as a community space for the
there going to be a
residents.
full-time maintenance on site?
No, there would not be. We have maintenance that travels around our different properties.
So you're saying that the residents won't have to do the mowing and that?
That is correct, yes. We would maintain all of the landscape and the snow removal, full service, so that we can help ensure the quality of the landscape and the property stays up to our standards.
Anyone else have a question? Okay, not hearing, see any more. I'll have a public hearing. Anyone like to come up forward? Anyone like to speak?
Thank you.
Thank you. The public is open. Okay, I don't see anyone rushing up, so we'll close the hearing. I'd entertain a motion.
I make a motion to forward the planned unit development rezone and ordinance to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would you have the roll call, please?
John Lastly,
Yes.
Dan Bayshore,
Yes.
Kevin Krulik,
Yes.
Corey Coontz,
Yes.
Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Ellie Mullen. Yes. Lori Gross.
Yes.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is docket number 22-74, UDO text amendments,
The end, so he wouldn't lose his voice.
Unified Development Ordinance for the following sections. UDO Section 4.19, Leap District, UDO Section 4, Use Matrix, UDO Section 7.8, Landscape Standards, and UDO Section 11.1, Definitions. Ben?
Let me get a couple things pulled up for you here before I get started. All right, good evening, Commission members. This item and the next item on the agenda are somewhat interrelated. This first item that's for you here tonight, as Mr. Campbell suggested, is text amendments to our zoning ordinance to add a LEAP zoning district. Just to kind of give you a little bit of background, actually here also tonight is Cynthia Bowen with Rundell Ernstberger. She's under contract with the county to prepare a PUD ordinance associated with the LEAP district, which is the state's innovation district that they're proposing out west and northwest of town. And as part of that process, we've been working on preparing a zoning district that could be placed in both the county zoning ordinance and also in the city's UDO that establishes a series of uses that are permitted and also prohibited, and then also prepares a series of setback standards, buffer yards, that address what we feel like are the standards that are expected within this LEAP zoning district. And the reason for the timing, certainly the PUD ordinance, I think that the original hope was that might be done by about this time or maybe in December, and that's a monumental undertaking, and I think it was going to be a challenge to get it done by December. So what we wanted to do is as part of the annexation that's coming through, the next item on the agenda, we wanted to get a zoning district that had a better series of standards that more adequately specifically address the types of uses and standards we expect in the LEAP district, and get that in place now so it could be applied to the annexation area as opposed to trying to make it fit within our ID zoning district, which is an appropriate industrial zoning district, but it doesn't really have the standards, at least at the high level that we expect in order to accommodate what we expect from the vision for the LEAP zoning district. So in terms of the timing, we are trying to get this done along with the annexation area. I know the state is working on a number of leads that are looking at this area, and one of those boxes they check is zoning in place for their use. They will not commit to an area until they know that the use is permitted. That's a pretty significant risk for them to make that commitment before that's in place. So what we're looking at is trying to get a use district, a zoning district in place that allows for the types of uses that we expect as a city in that area, and not allow the other ones that we don't anticipate, and make it very specific. And I'll go through here in a second. What we've done is we've created a series of new uses that were not in our ordinance currently, that are more associated with some of those new technology innovation, like aerospace, pharmaceuticals, microchip manufacturing, and the such. And then made sure that we did not permit uses that we didn't expect, some of the more traditional industrial and manufacturing, which are not elements that we expect in the LEAP zoning district. So we really wanted to focus on those targeted industries that the state is marking this area to, and make sure that those are specifically in the use matrix, and that we're very specifically allowing those and not allowing other uses that we don't expect in this area. So I'll go into that here in a little bit. Let me scroll down a little bit and let you look at the list of uses. And again, what we're working on right now, we're working in concert with the county and with what Rundell Ernstberg is doing for the county. We want to make sure that the standards are the same, whether the property that's in the LEAP area is in the city or the county. We want to make sure that the use lists are the same, setback standards are the same, the buffer standards are the same, so that there's consistency in this area. So to kind of walk through, and again, this only applies to areas that would be in the city. This does not apply to areas in the county. This is only areas that would have jurisdiction. So if they want to pull the screen up for me here. So this is the list of permitted uses. We do have a series of agricultural uses that are still permitted, primarily agribusiness, but we still understand that it's going to be a period of time for this to develop out, so we want to make sure we continue to permit the agricultural uses that are already out there. Transportation services, electric vehicle charging stations, that's a permitted use. On the institutional side, we do allow the typical public services you might see in an area that's at this scale: fire, police stations, government facilities, post office, et cetera. On the professional services side, again, we're focused on what we expect from a corporate office perspective. So administrative or professional offices, banks or financial institutions, conference centers, corporate headquarters and corporate parks, and then offices for professional management development training. So these are, again, all targeted industries from the professional services and office side that we wanted to continue, that we wanted to really focus on in this area. A couple of, in terms of retail, again, the LEAP zoning district is intended to really focus on the industrial and innovation part of this development. When we get into the annexation, we'll talk about some of the other use areas that are in the concept plan. This is really just focused on that industrial innovation park area. So we don't have retail uses are permitted. There are other areas within this overall district that would be more of a mixed use amenity area that would have retail uses, but in this industrial area, we're primary focus on industry. So you'll see that the list of retail uses and services is fairly short. And then we'll get into warehousing, industrial. Actually, we don't even need to put warehousing on there because we don't permit warehousing as a standalone use. So here's a list of just the targeted industries that is really the focus of this LEAP district, and that would be aerospace, product and parts manufacturing, computer and peripheral equipment manufacturing, drugs and drug sundries wholesalers, electrical equipment manufacturing, light fabrication, medical and diagnostic laboratories, motor vehicle manufacturing, and really even more focus than that, it's more on the electric vehicle part of the industry is the focus. Pharmaceutical medical manufacturing, research and development, scientific research and development services, semiconductor and other electronic component manufacturing, and then solar cells manufacturing. So if there is a use that does not fit in one of these categories, it is not permitted in this district. So we really wanted to be hyper-focused on those targeted industries by creating this list. And then in terms of conditional uses, there were some additional things that we wanted to make sure that we had a higher level of review on those for various reasons. Recreational uses, we wanted to make sure we had a higher level of review to make sure if there is something that is proposed in this area, we were able to review those conditions. And then on the utility side, you have the things that you need to have in this area, like sanitary treatment plants, utility substations, water towers, well fields, et cetera, that might be in this area. But we wanted to make sure we had a higher level review to make sure the placement of them is appropriate, the buffers might be appropriate, and those sorts of things, so that we just have that higher level of review that will go to the Board of Zoning Appeals to review those. And then there are other components of the industry that we wanted to make sure we had that additional layer of review, like battery manufacturing. That broad, the NAICS classification, the North American Industry Classification System, identifies the types of uses that fall under this classification. And if you looked at the overall definition, there may be some things in that classification we don't want to see in this area, like if somebody wanted to come and say they wanted to build lead acid car batteries, that's not something we're focused on, but there may be a new battery technology we would want to see in this area. But we wanted to make sure we had that additional level of review so we can make sure it really is something that we want to see in this area. And that's as you go down that list, chemical and allied products manufacturing, edge and turbine power or transmission equipment manufacturing. These are all things that we wanted to make sure that we really could drill in on that use and make sure it was a use that we really wanted to see in this area. And going down the list, the one thing I did want to point out, we've got solar electric power generation. This is not commercial solar farms. We're not looking to accommodate distribution to the system. What this would accommodate really is for an individual user that wanted to provide solar for their use, and specifically for their use, they're not putting anything back to the system. We did want to make sure that we were able to accommodate those things with the appropriate setbacks and buffer yards associated with those types of uses. So that's a quick rundown of that permitted use list. Associated with that, we wanted to get into some of what we feel like are the appropriate setback standards for uses in this area. Again, much larger setbacks. We're really looking for a real natural setting along the streets and making sure we got appropriate buffer yards so that we can protect what's going on out there and really get the aesthetic we're looking for. To that end, I will go into, let me look at this chart for you here. And then I'll show you a comparison here in a second that shows you the difference, why we wanted to go to this LEAP zoning district versus the ID zoning district. You'll see here, what we do is we look at the use that's proposed versus uses that may be currently existing. So you'll see, we'll go straight to industrial because that's primarily what we're going to see in this LEAP zoning district. For industrial to existing agricultural use, we have a minimum of a 300-foot setback before you would see any buildings. If there's adjacent uses agricultural. Residential, you'll see 400 feet is the minimum setback, and I'll go into that a little bit here in a second. There's some variation to that you'll see. Industrial to existing commercial is 150 feet, office 150, and to industrial would be 50 feet. So where those two existing uses, they would have a smaller setback. Now to go back to the industrial to residential setback, what we've identified here is the maximum height permitted in the LEAP district would be 250 feet. We don't expect to see many buildings 250 feet, but there are some users, primarily in microchip industry, that do have some taller building requirements. For that 400-foot setback, the tallest building you will see at a 400-foot setback is 75 feet. For every foot above 75 feet, that setback increases an additional 5 feet. So for example, if a user came in proposing a 175-foot tall building, that would be an additional 100 feet over that minimum, so that would require that setback to increase 500 feet. So the actual setback for building that tall would be 900 feet from the closest property line for those portions of the building that are that tall. So we really wanted to make sure you kind of have the staggered setback. If you're looking for at a more standard 75-foot building, you meet these 400-foot standards. The taller your building gets, the farther it needs to get away from the property line, again, to create those protections and those setbacks we're looking for. And now let me pull up the comparison for you here so you can kind of see why we wanted to create a new district here. So this is a comparison of our existing general industrial zoning classification versus the LEAP. So the front setback, and I specifically looked at industrial to residential here just to make a similar comparison. In the general industrial zoning district, that setback from industrial residential is 100 feet. And as I just mentioned, LEAP district will start at 300 feet and go up from there. It could be as high as 1,300 feet depending on the height of the building. So again, at least 3 times the setback is what our existing zoning classification allows. Side and rear setbacks, industrial residential is 50 feet. Again, LEAP is 300 plus depending on the height of the building. Maximum height in ID is 50 feet. In LEAP district, it's 75. And again, it allows up to 250 feet depending on, and it would require increased setbacks. So again, we're allowing a taller maximum height, but then also having the setback standards that associate with that. Street buffers, I haven't talked really about buffers yet, but I'll show you this comparison. The street buffer requirement in the ID district is a 20-foot buffer along the street, and that would include over a 500-foot stretch, 30 trees and 45 shrubs for every 500 feet. So again, only a 20-foot width. In LEAP district, we're proposing a street buffer that's 150 feet in width, or about almost 8 times the width that you see here, including 55 trees, tall grasses, prairie mix, and also a minimum 8-foot berm. There is no berm required in the street buffer for the ID district, and we're requiring a minimum of an 8-foot berm along any major corridors in the LEAP zoning district that you would see here. Industrial to residential buffer, right now that industrial residential buffer, and this would be an internal property line, where you've got an internal property line where it's industrial residential next door. Right now, the ID district would require a 25-foot buffer. It would include 8 trees and 15 shrubs, and a minimum of a 6-foot berm, and this I think is every 100 feet. What we're proposing in the LEAP zoning district would be a 125-foot buffer width, or 5 times the size. And that would include 24 trees and a minimum 6-foot berm. So similar berm height and 3 times the number of trees that you would see in that same area. So that's really one of the reasons why we really wanted to get the LEAP zoning district put in place here, to make sure that we're accommodating the right kinds of uses and what we think are the right kinds of setbacks for those uses, which are, as you can see, much more significant than what's in the general industrial zoning classification. Accompanied with just the standard setbacks and buffer yards, there's a number of additional items. In the landscaping section, we detail out that corridor buffer requirement that I just mentioned. It talks about how that's applied, the 150 feet, the character of that landscape area, the planting requirements, as I mentioned. There's deciduous trees, evergreen trees, and ornamental trees that are part of that requirement. Other standards, as again, we mentioned the landscape berms, the 6 to 8 foot height that I had mentioned already. If a user were to incorporate a decorative fence into that landscaping, there are standards associated with that. And then it also encourages stormwater ponds, detention ponds to be placed within that area as well. And if they do so, the standards that would be associated with that as well. So that kind of gives you a brief overview of how that standard would be applied. And again, that's a standard that's above and beyond anything that we have in our ordinance now. I mentioned before the buffers on an internal property line. We do have 2 standards depending on the types of uses. Again, you look at our existing buffer standards you see on here, they range anywhere from 5 feet to 25 feet is the largest, and we're talking about 75 and 125 foot buffers for the LEAP zoning district uses. And then those applications are detailed out here. Again, as I mentioned, industrial to residential was the one I used in the comparison chart, and that's buffer yard F, but we do have standards for other uses that might be proposed within this area. Another major component to this, I've kind of talked about the interior property lines, and there's also a perimeter to the LEAP district area. So those areas that would be out on the western perimeter, on the northern perimeter, where it goes from what would be in the LEAP district to that which would be outside the LEAP district. And many of these areas still within the county, agricultural, rural, residential areas. We wanted to provide a very significant protection to those areas that wouldn't exist now. The ID district wouldn't require anything like this in our current zoning ordinance, so we really wanted to provide a significant protection to those areas that would be outside the LEAP district. As you can see here, we're requiring a buffer yard width of 1,500 feet on any perimeter, where it's the perimeter of the LEAP district, and then everything outside of that, within that 1,500 feet, you would not have any industrial activity. It would all be landscaped area, natural area. And again, there's landscape character that's required, minimum tree planting requirements, berm requirements, et cetera. So again, we really wanted to make sure we got appropriate protection both within the district, but then also on the perimeter of the district. Again, things that aren't in the ID district now. I think that hits the highlights on the landscaping. We do have specific use standards that we really don't have detailed out. So like for electric vehicle charging, our ordinance doesn't really address that specifically now, so we did add some requirements in terms of where those could be located and how they would be designed. So those are included in here. And then also information, again, I mentioned like a private use solar power generation. We do have standards for that. Again, significant setbacks and buffers required. Restrictions on height, screening requirements, how the ground cover would be managed underneath any area where solar would be used, and those sorts of things. Again, making sure we've accommodated those. We didn't really have a good section of our ordinance dealing with standards associated with that use. And the final thing, and I'll just do this really quickly, I won't show you, but Chapter 11 is our definition section. Anytime where we've added a new use to that use table, we also have to define it. And so what we've done is really looked at the NAICS codes associated with those land uses and used the definition of those, which is a national standard for those use classifications, and made sure we properly identify those and define those in our Chapter 11 definitions there. So I wouldn't say it was a quick rundown. It was a rundown of everything that we're proposing there. I know Cynthia's here. I think she's going to provide a little bit of an update on where she's at with the county and kind of what they're working on there, and then I'll start answering any questions if you have any.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Bowen. I'm with Rundell, Ernstberger and Associates. Thank you for having me here tonight. As Ben said, we've been working with him as well to develop our draft LEAP Development Plan District Ordinance. We, as well, have our draft completed, and we are providing that to the Plan Commission for review. We have sent out a working draft towards the public, and we do have that on our website at BooneCountyInnovation.com. To this date, we only have 3 comments thus far on the ordinance, and we've seemed to have addressed those in the use section. But other than that, our next Plan Commission meeting will be on the 7th of December, where the Area Plan Commission will hear this before them. We are working on the larger PUD district, as Ben said. That will be made up of a variety of sub-districts, including this district. So when the time comes and we're ready for that draft, we will be bringing that forward both to the public as well as you all, and have a public process as part of that. We are creating a regulating plan, which is an underlying plan that will be amended into the comprehensive plan. And again, I will work with Ben, and you may use any or all of that for your needs as well. So we're hoping to be able to roll some of those things out in January of 2023. And with that, if you have any questions of me, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Anyone from the board have questions for her?
Questions for Ben?
Any for Ben either? Anyone have a question for Ben?
I got 2 quick ones, Ben. Can you elaborate the staggered building height setback requirement, the sliding scale based on heights over 75? Can you elaborate, is that if any part of the building, the entire building, or is it just the part of the building that's over that height?
Yes, so any part of the building that exceeds 75 feet would have to meet the additional setback. So for example, if a majority of their building is only 75 feet tall, it's subject to the standard setback of 400 feet. If they have a portion of the building that is 100 feet tall, that portion would have to meet the increased setback. So they may look to situate the building such that, that portion is the additional setback. So you may have a situation where there's a building with multiple heights. The shorter portion of the building may be 400 feet from the property line. The taller portion would have to meet the additional setback.
And then are buffer yards within the setback or in addition to the setback?
They're within the setback, yeah. So in terms of the buffer yards, if you have a 125-foot buffer required, there would be no industrial activity within that 125 feet. That would be restricted just to landscaping, berms, et cetera. There would be, once you get beyond the 125 feet, you might have like a drive access area, parking lots, those sorts of things. That would begin potentially at 125 feet. What I didn't detail out here is some of the standards we already have in our existing ordinance. So we have parking lot perimeter landscaping requirements, interior landscaping requirements, architectural requirements that all would be applicable to this district just like they are every other district. So what I've essentially detailed out for you is the things that we're adding, but everything else that's already in our ordinance would be applicable to this area as well. So if you got a 125-foot buffer yard, then you got parking. That parking's got a parking lot perimeter landscaping requirement, interior landscaping requirements that would all apply to that. And then depending on what the adjacent use is, a building would start at 400 feet plus.
Okay, Ben, I have just a couple questions here.
Yeah.
In the permitted uses,
Uh-huh.
there's 2 things I just have some questions on. The vehicle manufacturing, going back to that, does that, then, are we basically saying an electric vehicle version of a plant like the SIA sitting up in Lafayette?
Theoretically, it could be. Yeah, electric vehicle assembly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that also includes things like the paint plants and things like that. That's where
I mean, they would have a paint shop, and those would have to meet all the EPA requirements for those sorts of uses. The list of standards for things like that are longer than my arm. But yes, that theoretically, if it were an assembly facility, there would likely be a paint shop.
Like most of the environmental stuff that I would see that dealing with that has to do mostly with the paint and everything else. The other
Correct.
assemblies that.
Everything else is primarily assembly at a vehicle plant.
I mean, if putting it to like a condition, you say, everything's fine except for we'd want to specify, we want the environmentally safe paint production facilities put into this plant. Should we switch it to something like a conditional use, or should we just leave it as a permitted use and try to deal with that as it comes through?
I mean, I guess the EPA and state requirements for those sorts of uses are in place regardless of whether it's permitted or conditional. And so, if we made it a conditional, again, I would just wonder what additional conditions we would place on that use that wouldn't already be in place.
That's what I'm thinking, just the paint part of the facility would be the only thing I'm thinking of. I mean, it's like.
Right.
I mean, they have a lot more environmentally safe paint facilities going in now. That's almost starting to be the industry standard, but it's almost like we'd want it to be. So I'm not sure if we might want to move that to conditional or not. The other one involves the pharmaceutical. I think it's actually, I answer my own question looking in the definitions, that it says more like it deals with the biological pharmaceutical manufacturing. So we're really not dealing with the harsher chemical side of the manufacturing that the industry used to be so heavy with, because it says that right in our definitions.
Yeah, about every pharmaceutical plant uses some sort of chemical. Actually, about every use on here probably uses a chemical in some part of their operation.
Yeah.
But again, there are local, state, and federal guidelines for how those are stored and how those are used, that every use out here would have to meet regardless of where that use falls on our use table.
Okay, all right, I just want to let my views be known here on this one, so.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Ben from the board? Okay, thank you, Ben. I'll now ask for the applicant to come forward.
Well, we are the applicants.
We are, okay, you are? Okay, so you ready for the next piece?
Yep, we're ready for the public hearing.
Okay, open it to the public hearing. Anyone like to come forward and speak?
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, my name is Mike Andrioli, Office 1393 West Oak Street. I represent the Boone County Preservation Group. That is a 1,000-plus member strong group that essentially was formed to try to oppose annexation and oppose blanket zoning classifications for the outlying areas that might be annexed. The group has morphed a little bit into working with the commissioners to try to make positive comments with regard to changes in the establishment of a PUD district, similar to what Mr. Bontrager has laid out. I would hope that the Plan Commission tonight does not make a recommendation, but allow the public to assimilate this. I just received this by email some 3 weeks ago in order to be prepared to talk about this tonight. And it wasn't even from Mr. Bontrager, it was from Cynthia Bowen's office that we had received this, and they had been working on this jointly together. And we welcome that, quite frankly, and we welcome our ability to have input. We've not had an opportunity to give input, given how short we've received this information. And the PUD that Cynthia Bowen had rolled out, I assume similar to what Mr. Bontrager had. And that concerns us, and it concerns us that members of the general public haven't had an opportunity to weigh in. We're not suggesting that this is not a good idea. In fact, we think it's a great idea. We're just concerned that the information and the elements are not all there, and we want to have an opportunity as a community to be able to weigh in, make our comments, make suggestions, some of which may be adopted, some of which may not be. But the public input and the public buying into this is extremely, extremely important in terms of moving forward. We'll have objections to the annexation on as it's formulated in the next public hearing that you have, but I would simply suggest that the public be given an opportunity to weigh in on this. We're not asking for an infinite amount of time or anything of that nature, but we don't think rolling it out tonight asking you to vote on it tonight is appropriate, given the fact that it has only been in the public domain for a few short weeks, and we have not had an opportunity to go ahead and comment on that. So that would be my comments tonight, and we would ask you to not vote on this tonight, but allow the public to have an opportunity to review it and comment on what Mr. Bontrager is asking you to adopt from a text amendment standpoint to your next meeting. As I said, not for a long period of time, but we do want to have an opportunity to properly weigh in on this. Essentially, this is coming at warp speed, and this was not the process that was originally discussed. The process that was originally discussed is that it would work through the public process, work through the public domain, and move forward at that point in time. That was the actual process that was discussed. It's being moved forward because the state's now trying to annex a big block of land with a large industrial classification to it. That's the reason this process is being rushed. And it's not, Mr. Bontrager is working as fast as he can, and so is Cynthia Bowen. But if community input is important, this needs to be tabled in order for community input to be given. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come speak on this issue only? Because we have another whole thing to come up here. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name's Carrie Douglas. I signed in over there. I'm also with Boone County Preservation Group. I just wanted to make a few points about the landscaping. They're presenting you standards tonight to make it seem like it's an easy decision, but I feel like, as I've done a lot of research in this area, it's difficult to comprehend when you see a table comparing the number of feet for setbacks. I think that the best efforts are being put forward here, but just to give you a concept, the top golf nets, those are 200 feet tall. So that's about the equivalent to the buildings that we're looking at getting in here. 75 is what we want, but 200 is going to be allowed, and we already know more than 200. So top golf nets, how many miles away can you see those? I was in Noblesville yesterday, and I could see the top golf nets. So I don't know that 24 trees on a 6-foot berm is really going to be effective. So we just need to take that into consideration. When you see a table and it's telling you that for every so many feet, it's going to be this much feet high, it's going to be this much further back, it's difficult to comprehend on a table. You need to think about it in real life. The cold storage outside of Lebanon is only 150 feet tall. How far away can you see that? Trees aren't going to make a difference. 6 feet's not going to make a difference. The other thing that's also being talked about with these is the restrictions. Dan, you brought up about EV and the paint. I've done a lot of research on EV, and it's not the paint that's a problem, it's the battery storage. And there are no requirements of national standards as long as your arm. They're being discussed. I've watched symposiums about them, but they don't exist yet. So there's a lot that can happen within these standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Jim Love. I live at 3150 North State Road 52, Lebanon, Indiana. If you, let's see, got yours? Yeah. And I've got some information here that I presented to you guys. It should be passed out already. You want to wait? Are you going to go again? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll be back.
Yeah, you'll get your chance, trust me. Okay. Anyone else that wants to talk just about what Ben just came to? Okay. Not seeing anyone else come forward, I'll close that part of the public hearing, and we'll start on the next docket number. Ben?
Yeah, maybe just to address a couple items. I'll get this plugged back. I'll have to move this again later, but I'll get plugged back in, get out of the way. So just a couple of quick items. So electric vehicle assembly does not include battery manufacturing. That's not permitted. That's actually a separate use classification, so it is strictly assembly of vehicles. So anything tire manufacturing, wire assembly manufacturing, that is not included in that use classification. So I 100% agree. The battery side of it needs a much higher level of review, which is why we haven't permitted it. It's conditional to see whether we even want it at all. So EV assembly just includes assembling the vehicles. So I think, Dan, to your point, the paint booth is the one issue there that, you know, has the higher level of standards. But the battery side, that's not a permitted. The manufacturing of batteries is not permitted under the assembly of vehicles classification. It's very specific that it's just assembly. So those parts are coming in and just being put on the car. So that there certainly would be a series of standards related to manufacturing, but that is included under a separate use classification. We certainly wanted to make sure that was considered separately from that. In terms of the timing, Certainly, that's up to the Plan Commission to decide how they want to move forward with this. We provided notice to the paper in a timely fashion. We've had our information posted on the website. We've obviously been accepting comments throughout the last week and a half. I haven't received any comments about the drafts that have been posted on the web or on our website. But certainly that's up to the Plan Commission to decide how they want to move forward. The timing is, certainly the annexation that's also before you tonight. The thought is that we would want to apply, our recommendation on the annexation would be to apply the LEAP zoning to this district to that as opposed to the ID zoning district that was considered at the last annexation. We felt that that was a better fit for the annexation. So that's really why we're trying to get this put in place on the same timing as the annexation to make sure we had that in place to recommend it for the zoning for the annexation area as opposed to ID, because we just feel like that's a better fit. So that's really why the timing is such that we're moving this forward now. But certainly, if you have any questions or comments related to the timing and schedule, I'd be happy to answer them.
Can you talk procedurally what that's going to look like?
Yeah, so essentially, they'll follow the same schedule. So both of those items are ordinances that would have to go before and be considered by the council. So if the Plan Commission decided to make a positive recommendation on the LEAP text amendment tonight, that recommendation would go to the council for a first and second reading. The annexation, theoretically, again, if you made a recommendation on the annexation tonight for the zoning classification, that would follow that same schedule. What essentially would happen is you would have a meeting where the council would adopt the text amendment for the LEAP zoning district and then apply it to the annexation.
This new zoning classification, are we going to try to go back and put it on the Lilly project that was already passed?
We don't have to. We've talked about that with them. In fact, they're probably going to be filing their development plan within the next month. They are over and above any of standards associated with the LEAP zoning district, much less the ID zoning district. They have like 14-foot mounds. They have significant landscaping. They've got significant setbacks. So they probably could go into the LEAP zoning district because they more than meet those standards. It's more of a timing thing for them. They're bringing their development plan up in December for approval in January because they're hoping to start moving dirt sometime in April. That's at least their proposed schedule right now. So for them, it's more of a timing thing than anything. They would happily go into that zoning district because of the standards. They're already going to meet them anyway. They just need to get going so they can be ready to move dirt by April 1st.
So even if we did it, even if we did that, it wouldn't have really affect their timing at all of them starting.
So they would actually have to request a rezone. Since they're not part of the annexation, we can't just apply it without them requesting it, because so there would be another step for them. They would have to come back and request the zoning after the text amendment was adopted in December, which means it would be January before their rezone could be heard, February before it's adopted, so then they're not filing their development plan until February or March. So we're starting to bump up against that schedule in April.
Ben, what about the other 1,000-ish acres that aren't the Lilly development?
We could, I think I would suggest that we may consider doing a rezone after the fact. But keep in mind also that PUD ordinance is going to be ready sometime in the first quarter of next year. So I think by the time we would have a use that was looking in one of those areas, the ordinance would likely be ready. So my guess is we'll probably be steering towards that PUD ordinance then, as opposed to looking at trying to get the LEAP zoning district. Theoretically, we could go ahead and do that at the next meeting if we wanted to just go ahead and do that and get the LEAP zoning district in place for the remainder of that acreage. But I think, by the time we go through that process, we'd probably be about ready to consider the PUD ordinance too, but certainly we could discuss that as a potential option.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, not seeing any, I would entertain a motion to recommend the Plan Commission forward the proposed text amendments to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
I'll make a motion that proposed text amendments to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation.
I'll second.
For the records, docket number 2274. Okay? But you have a motion and a second. Okay? Call the roll, please.
John Lastly? Dan Bayshore?
Yes.
Kevin Krulik?
Yes.
Corey Coons,
Yes.
Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Ashley Paddock,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Ally Mullen,
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, then the next docket is 2272, consideration of initial zoning classification for voluntary annexation into the city of Lebanon, consisting of approximately 5,500 acres. Project LEAP Phase 2. The property is located to the north and south of State Road 32, west bordering 500 west, to the west, and to the north, 450 north and I-65. Ben?
All right, give me a moment to pull up all my pretty pictures again here. All right, I think that will get me started here, and then I'll pull up some additional things as they're needed. So the second component that's before you here tonight is the Phase 2 annexation of the LEAP district. And if they want to go ahead and pull up the screen. Uh-oh, looks like my cord came out. Hopefully that did it. Yep, here we go. This is going to be really hard to see on here, but I know we do have some bigger maps down here I can set up on the easel. This is the overall area that you see here. To orient yourself, here is State Road 32 that kind of runs through this southern portion. Here's the Big 4 Trail, and then US 52 extending to the northwest here. I-65 is just off the map here, and then you can kind of see it peeking in at the northeast corner here. So that kind of orients you. 500 west is roughly at the western boundary here. You got primarily the acreage is around the north and south sides of State Road 32 here. Contiguity with the existing city limits is what you see highlighted in red along this eastern boundary. So just to kind of a little bit of background here, as you recall, a few months ago, Phase 1 of the annexation for the LEAP district came through. It's about 1,400 acres kind of running along the interstate from State Road 32 up to and including the Lilly area that's north and east of town along Interstate 65. That came to you, and you guys recommended the general industrial zoning classification with restrictions on permitted uses. That ordinance was adopted by the Common Council and became effective 30 days later, so that portion is in the city limits, which you see again reflected by the contiguity that you see in there in red. In terms of the timing of this, this is coming in. Again, I mentioned there's leads that are in the pipeline right now. And again, as I mentioned, one of those boxes that needs to be checked as part of that review process is 1, annexation, 2, zoning. They're looking to make sure that it's within the city's jurisdiction and it's zone appropriate for their use. So this is a step the state is pushing, is moving towards right now to bring this area in to make sure that they've got within city limits and proper zoning to accommodate those users that are looking to potentially make commitments here. No commitments yet, but certainly some things are looking at this area, and this is a significant box they want to check. With some of my experience working on these projects previously, a lot of times as they're looking through the hundreds of sites that have been sent to them, a site that's not zone property gets thrown in the trash without looking at it again. So that's a significant part of that process to make sure that's put in place ahead of time and is a requirement for them to consider that site. So that's really why we're looking to get this moving forward. In terms of the process, again, just a reminder, this is what's before you here tonight is not consideration of the annexation. You're not looking at the merits of the annexation. Your job as a plan commission is to look at this, review their concept plan, which we'll get to here in a little bit, determine whether you think that's an appropriate concept for this area, and then recommend a zoning district. So you guys aren't voting whether you think the annexation is a good idea, whether you think it's not a good idea. You're merely looking at if the city council who makes the decision on the annexation were to consider that annexation, you guys make a recommendation on that zoning district. So your job isn't necessarily to decide whether the annexation's good. It's really just to look at that land use. In terms of process, there are a number of components that we look at. The first is the concept plan that was provided by the applicant. I'll get that into that here in a second. And then we review it based on the comprehensive plan. and then we look at what makes them, what's the most likely outcomes and determination of those zoning classifications. I'll show you another map here. In the petition received by the applicant, what they've looked at here is what would primarily be the LEAP district area, kind of the innovation industrial area is what you see in pink. They had requested a zoning district, the general industrial zoning district, to be applied to this area. Anything, and you see here that this is the trail, is kind of the dividing line. So anything that was being proposed to be annexed north of the trail, they're showing as being the default zoning classification of SF. And that's primarily because this becomes more of a mixed-use area. There's amenity areas, there's residential, there's commercial, corporate office, research and development. It's really more of a mixed-use area. We don't really have a good zoning classification that matches up with that. So we really wanted to keep it in that base zoning classification for now until that gets better defined in the PUD ordinance in terms of those mixed-use requirements. But everything south of here is really just in that LEAP district. And that's why we really went to the effort to prepare that LEAP zoning district, because we think that that's more appropriate than the general industrial district for this area. And so that's what we looked at based on their request and what we looked at in terms of staff. Let me get to the concept plan here. I've got a general concept plan. Oh, let me zoom in a little bit. That's a little hard. And I know the applicant has a more detailed concept plan as well as some build-out concepts they'll show you here in a second. So they're going to walk through those with you and what you see in terms of character that they expect from the area and the land uses. And then also I know they're going to give you some updates on the status of the utility discussions that are ongoing. We'll get into that here in a second. I'll let them do that for you. But just to kind of walk you through generally what you see here on this concept plan, everything that's really in this purple color is what would be really the innovation district, the mega sites, the innovation centers, the research and development. What you see kind of in this, we'll call it an orange color, would be really the amenity area where you're really going to see more corporate office, mixed use, services, retail, et cetera. And then you go more into a high-tech park, and then the Lilly site is what you see to the north here in the area of 300 North and north of that. So they presented this concept to us, and again, like I said, they've got some additional detail that they'll go through in a second, but this is what they provided in order to support the request for the zoning. It does show land uses. In terms of, so we have some concept plan in terms of the submittal, what's expected as part of that concept plan, and it really is looking at existing property lines, existing parcels, which they have provided in those previous maps, existing conditions, looking at proposed land uses, and then it gets into a level of detail that's really challenging at this scale, which is providing road locations and widths, and then also utility locations. At this scale, what you see in color here is about 11,000 acres. It's really challenging to be able to show that at this stage of the development process, because until uses start getting identified, you don't really know where the roads are going to go, where the utilities are going to be. They could have provided a concept plan showing those, but it wouldn't have been terribly meaningful because that was likely to change. Frankly, this is subject, you see here, it shows in red, subject to change. This is a concept at this time. I do know that they'll show you a build-out scenario here in a little bit that has more detail, but in terms of requesting something like that for 11,000 acres, it's really challenging to do at this stage of the game before zoning is in place. Frankly, there's a lot of risk to putting in the design together for 11,000 acres before you know if zoning's in place. It's not something that a developer would typically do. I know it's the state, but they're operating as a developer in this case. And to ask a developer to go to the expense to design out utilities before they have zoning in place is a significant risk and not something typically expected on a project this scale. And just to remind you, you guys all remember when Waterford came through a few years ago, this is the concept plan that Waterford provided at this same stage of the process. Again, the level of detail in terms of the road layouts, lot layouts, golf course location, those were unknown at this time, but it was important to them to have the zoning in place before they went to the expense to get those things put in place. And so really what you see here is a real general road layout and land use categories. And this is what we considered at the time when we were looking at the PUD rezone for this, which is kind of the stage right here of recommending zoning. So this is consistent to what we've asked for. And this is a little over 2,000 acres, and we're talking about an area that's 2.5 times that size now. In terms of the comprehensive plan, we talked about this a little bit when the phase 1 annexation came through. The comprehensive plan is not a legally binding document. It is a guide to be used to frame discussion. There is nothing legally binding about it. When we did that process about 4 or 5 years ago, I remember one of the first questions we talked about with our consultant, actually it was Cynthia and her team with Rendell Ernstberger. They asked us if we wanted to master plan and provide a future land use map for the entirety of Center Township, or whether we really wanted to focus on the areas we felt like over a 5-year period might develop. We decided at that time it would have been challenging with the changing markets and the changing demands that trying to identify what the land uses would be for the entirety of Center Township would be difficult. So we really wanted to focus based on what we knew at the time, what information we had at the time would be areas that might develop in that 5-year time horizon. We felt like it was going to be challenging to try to really start to guess what would happen in the 10-year timeline or 15-year timeline. So our master plan was really focused on the areas that we thought would develop. So in this area, when we were looking at this area and what it would take to provide utilities, if the city was going to have to do utilities ourselves, we really felt like the areas that would develop were closer to the city, the existing city limits. So there was an area, if you look at this map, this area that's to the south of State Road 32, we did identify some additional area for industrial. That's ours where we thought the business park might expand is to the west. So we did identify some of those areas, industrial land uses. We were looking at the time the potential for mixed use around the Big Four Trail, which would be consistent likely with this amenity area. And really after that, we've really felt like with our utilities that were in place at the time and what we were seeing in the markets, it was going to be hard to really predict what was going to happen outside of that. So we chose not to do it at that time with the expectation as the markets change and things happen over the next 5 years that we would adjust that land use plan accordingly and really look at what we felt like the future was every 5 years. So we're really seeing that this market is changing rapidly, demand's changing rapidly, and our comprehensive plan is something that we wanted to be able to review about every 5 years to make sure that we made updates to those to reflect what was happening in the market. And certainly 4.5 years ago when we started that process and sitting with that steering committee, maybe we didn't dream big enough. If we felt like that there was going to be an opportunity for a large innovation center like this, we might have planned for it. So maybe we didn't dream big enough and we should have considered something like that as a possibility for Lebanon, but we didn't at that time. And frankly, Waterford wasn't even in our realm of possibility at that time either. That was something we didn't predict either, but it was an opportunity that came to us and we felt like it was an important opportunity to consider. So with that, while the comprehensive plan doesn't reflect this, it was something we didn't even attempt to consider 4.5 years ago as a possibility for this city. And so we really feel like it's important to consider it now based on the concepts they're proposing and the opportunities that they're proposing and bringing to us. With that, I think I'll go through the recommendation here, and then I'm going to invite up the petitioners to walk through, again, just to give you a broad overview of the LEAP district, walk through their concept plans and updates on utilities. But just to kind of walk through again, as I mentioned, the petitioner had requested the ID zoning district south of the trail and the SF North. And I think in our recommendation, what we would be recommending is everything that's shown in pink here. We would suggest recommending the LEAP zoning district for that pink area and then SF for blue. So that's what our recommendation is on this, is that we would recommend that the Plan Commission recommend the LEAP zoning classification for the proposed annexation territory south of the Big Four Trail. And then SF for the remaining area, including the trail and everything north of it. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any general questions before we turn it over to the petitioner to talk about the LEAP district.
Anyone on the board have a question for Ben? Okay. Have the applicant come forward.
Get his presentation up for him.
I don't think Kent will have a laptop to plug in.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kent Franzen. I'm an attorney here in Lebanon. My office is at 225 West Main Street, and I represent the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which is a state agency charged with bringing high-quality economic development to the state of Indiana. And they have selected Boone County in general, and this area in particular, as a site for a innovation district that would focus on economies of the future, manufacturing of the future, research and development. As we've indicated previously, it's not your garden variety office park, business park, warehouse park. This is something unique and special. I also, in this proceeding, represent 43 owners of land containing 122 separate and distinct parcels, comprising about 5,225 acres of land, which is located outside the corporate limits or municipal limits of the city of Lebanon. But this land is contiguous. It sufficiently adjoins the current city boundaries to be contiguous and therefore subject to annexation. That process of establishing contiguity is done by a professional land surveyor. At least 1/8 of the perimeter boundary of the area to be annexed must adjoin the current city limits. And we have provided the certification of American Structure Point that we do meet that contiguity requirement. This process also contemplates that we must have signed consents of all of the landowners who wish to be annexed. This is what's referred to in the law as a super voluntary annexation. 100% of the owners of the property in question want to be annexed into the city of Lebanon. No parcel of land is being brought in involuntarily. No parcel of land is being brought into the city without the affirmative written consent of its owner. Now, you will see on this document and in your materials that you've previously received, this is a map that is similar to one that Mr. Bontrager presented, but this one has some highlighted areas that are within the confines of the 5,225 acres. It is not made part of the 5,225, but it's in the area of this land. There's about 60 owners, 60 parcels of land that have chosen not to, at this point in time, be annexed. We had to file this petition in order to meet certain deadlines. Some of these parcels that are in that 60 are going to want to be in the annexation. They've already indicated such, but we just can't keep changing the map, changing the petition. They could be brought in later, but that would require a separate and independent annexation proceeding. But at the moment, there are 60 parcels that are not going to be annexed. They would remain in Boone County, not part of the city, and they would not be subject to the ordinance that might be enacted with respect to this annexation. We have listed those parcels in our paperwork by name, by parcel number, and by acreage, so there's no confusion about who's in and who's out. In Indiana, as in most states to my knowledge, annexation, whether it be voluntary, which is what this is, or involuntary, which does happen occasionally, is a legislative function of municipal government. The process requires a petition for annexation, written consent of the landowners, a verification that the requirements for annexation have been met. If the petition appears to be in good order, our zoning ordinance requires that it be referred to you, the Plan Commission, for consideration initially of what the zoning should be if the land is annexed. As Ben indicated, it's not up to you folks to decide whether this annexation should move forward to adoption. But it's your place to make a recommendation, a non-binding recommendation on if it's going to be annexed, this is what we would like to see the zoning classification assigned. Notice of this hearing has been published in the newspapers required by law and sent to all of the affected landowners, both those who are being annexed and those who are surrounded by land being annexed, and those who by law are required to be notified because they live sufficiently close to the area, even though they're not part of the annexation. And those notices were all sent out in a timely manner. Now, the petition before you asks that the land be annexed into the city and assigned to two different zoning classifications. The land south of the Big Four Trail, the pink area on the map, we asked to be zoned general industrial. That's ID in your zoning ordinance. The area to the north, including the trail itself, we've asked that it be brought in under the default zoning classification of single-family residential. Now, that was the situation at the time we filed the petition. We didn't know what might happen in the interim. We don't know what will happen after tonight. So we've asked for ID zoning to the south and SF zoning to the north. But our paperwork and our petition does expressly state that if the city adopts what we're now calling a LEAP overlay zoning district, or what's been referred to as a planned unit development LEAP district, either of those two types of zoning ordinances, as long as we have meaningful input into the drafting of that ordinance, which we have had, and presumably will continue to have the opportunity to comment, then we will support that zoning. In other words, we ask for ID zoning south of the trail and SF zoning north, but if you can get the LEAP ordinance adopted, then we're happy with that, because we think it's actually better than your ID zoning ordinance currently as written. It provides for better protection for the neighboring property owners, wider setbacks, more restrictions on uses. We think it'd be better for the community. Depending upon what happens tonight, the process contemplates your recommendation, positive or negative, or what it specifically would recommend, to go to the city council for its initial consideration at its next meeting, next Monday night. What they do with it at that point is up to them. A fiscal plan will have to be prepared by your city's financial underwriter, Baker Tilly, demonstrating the economic impact of the project and of the annexation. And that would be presented at another meeting of the council later in December. We have provided, as part of our petition, a concept plan and a statement of commitments. The commitments are identical to the commitments that were made as part of the Phase 1 annexation relating to the land that includes the Eli Lilly plant and facilities. There are a number of restricted uses that we are simply agreeing are permitted in the industrial zoning district, the ID district, but that we don't want in our LEAP district. Those commitments are still in effect as part of this Phase 2 annexation. They may be overridden and rendered moot by the new LEAP ordinance because, as Ben pointed out, a lot of things that might generally be allowed in an industrial zoning district, steel mills, warehouses, refineries, any number of things, are simply not going to be allowed in this zoning district. So somewhat overkill, but we don't know what the zoning is going to be. All we can do is work with the zoning that's in effect at the moment. We have stated throughout this process that while we are, when I say we, I mean the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, I'm just the lawyer, we are the developer here in the general sense of the word. But the zoning of this project, whether this land will be annexed, how this land will be zoned, and how this land will be developed is a local decision, whether this land's in the county or the city. Local officials in Lebanon and Boone County will make the decision on what it's going to look like, where it's going to be located, what the rules are, what the restrictions are, what the requirements are. And we stand by that. And we've worked cooperatively with the city and the county to have input into what those rules should be. But we don't get to make those calls. People like you make those decisions, as well as the legislative officials at the county level would be the county commissioners. At the city level, it's the city council or common council. At this point, I'm going to call up Kurt Fullbeck, who's the Vice President of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. He has been intimately involved in this project from the beginning, and he's going to talk about some of the things that Ben mentioned, and frankly, he's better positioned to answer your questions than I am. So, Kurt, come forward, please. Thank you.
Good evening. As Kent mentioned, my name is Kurt Fullbeck. I'm the Vice President at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. The point of me being up here is to give you a little bit more detail on the concept plan as it's being presented in front of you. As you can see on the plan that was given to you, I want to highlight a couple of specific points relative to it. The purple areas that you see are the areas in which we envision there will be some sort of advanced manufacturing component. You can see a number of infrastructure-related projects that will be contemplated in this plan. Most notably would be State Route 32 being rerouted, as well as an extension on State Route 52 to extend a north-south parallel pathway along with I-65. The yellowish area, the mustard area that you see in the center, that is the area that we anticipate to be the amenity space area. And by amenity space, what we mean for that would be multifamily housing that could consist of townhomes, that could consist of apartments, that could consist of condos, office development. You would see bars, restaurants, event space, a place where people would want to congregate and be. The blue area, as outlined in this district, is where we're envisioning office, research and development, more of your typical office type of development. The pure yellow area that's along Hazel Rig and 500 West and along 52, that is highlighted as what we're terming public infrastructure. That could be a park, that could serve as a public purpose, a community center, an educational center, things of that nature, again, are the conceptual renderings at this point. The next couple slides are to indicate the type of development that we are looking to attract here. A couple of things that I want to point out, starting on this lower right-hand picture, where you will see a manufacturing facility setback. That is, again, to highlight our desire to have large buffer zones for these buildings not to be sitting right on top of roads, especially in those areas that will be heavily traversed. What you will see in this area moving north, sustainability will be a component to this. Part of what we are contemplating or anticipating as part of this development would be solar panel infrastructure, other renewable sources of energy. These would not be solar farms. These are not meant, again, to be large-scale solar panels that will be putting electric onto the grid. They are meant for single users. In this particular project, or this picture that you're looking at here, what it's showing is solar parking. So those panels actually act as a parking structure where the employees would then park under and have their car be sheltered from the elements. Moving on to the next picture, what you're seeing is a typical manufacturing facility that's being buffered by frontage that would be a high-quality construction of an office building, R&D facility, or similar such anticipated uses. Again, trying to show that you're not going to have a warehousing facility or manufacturing facility that would be sitting right on top of a road or public way. And then finally, again, in the buffering and the public infrastructure components of this, we do anticipate having things like trails that would be connected to the Big Four trail, interconnected throughout the district to provide a mode of transportation that is not just reliant upon cars. We will anticipate using those buffer zones to allow for those type of trail uses, and to provide that accessibility throughout. The one thing that I neglected to mention on the earlier slide was the Big Four trail. Under this concept plan, we are proposing that the Big Four trail be potentially relocated. The relocation of that is not guaranteed, it's not a requirement. Frankly, the reason that we are asking for it is because if you actually follow the Deer Creek along that route, it would actually make it more pleasant than just cutting through a field. So it has the dual benefit of providing some additional land development, but again, is not a requirement at this. It's merely a proposal. Moving on, again, starting in the lower left-hand corner, this is to, again, give you the concept of what we are looking for within this district. What you're seeing on that lower lower right-hand corner is a multifamily, mixed-use, live, work, play type of district. Again, moving upward, what you're seeing is a 4/1 development that we would anticipate having that type of design quality, glass, brick, things that are in high quality of nature. Moving to the left of that picture, what you're seeing is the interplay between trails and roads. The trails are not projected to be on the roads. They would be buffered. They'd be separate. Again, having accessibility through this district in multiple facets is an important aspect. Moving on to the next picture, again, it's just to provide a concept of the buffering that we would see from the roadway into potential land users. And then finally, again, the picture is intended to show the type of quality of construction that we're looking to attract in this district in a manufacturing facility that is set back from the road and could look like this at the end of the day. The final couple of renderings are just to give you a concept of what this would look like at potential full build-out. What you're seeing here is the mixed-use area that we've discussed with some amenity space built in. Again, providing a place where people want to live, work, and play. And then an overall rendering of what this could potentially look like at full build-out in decades from now. So with that, I will take any questions that you may have.
Anyone from the board have a question?
Yes, on the concept plan, I know we're looking to, the interchange is going to be there. And is 52 going to be routed to that interchange, or is it going to come down to 32?
Is 52 going to be routed to the new interchange?
Correct.
So the interchange that is currently going through the NDOT and Federal Highway process would be in this area. Under our conceptual plan, we're showing it at the County Road 300. What we're anticipating with State Route 52 would actually to run in its normal course now and then drop south through the amenity district to connect with State Route 32.
That just seems like a major traffic hazard starting to show up at the 32 exit. That's why I asked.
Yeah, and NDOT is been aware of this concept plan. They understand that there will be changes that need to be made at all of these, on all of these state routes. So that is what we are working through with them, is that as we get further with these potential end users and how those interchanges and how those intersections would interact will be dictated by the traffic flow and the traffic counts that are generated.
Anyone else have a question? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, I will now open up the public hearing. Now, let me say, you get 3 minutes. Okay, and then we will, if you have questions, Ben and the other folks will answer them afterwards. They're not going to do it in them, so you make the questions, they'll write it down, and they'll answer it after you're done. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, Mike Andrioli, 1393 West Oak Street. I'm an attorney representing the Boone County Preservation Group. In addition, in my letter that I sent to you, I'm representing a number of interested parties. These are members of the public who received notice of this particular zoning classification. So not only am I represent the general group, but I'm representing these specific property owners that were required to receive notice, and therefore they are interested parties in this particular matter. I'm going to be very brief as I've submitted something to you in writing. I would suggest to you that the applicant has not complied with your requirements in your zoning ordinance with regard to the concept plan. The concept plan says if a different zoning classification is required by the property owner, the owner shall be required to submit a concept plan section pursuant to 9.19 subdivision control procedures, major subdivision, upon application for annexation. The concept plan that I saw was not the generalities that you received tonight when this was filed. So we object to the concept plan and believe that it was not properly filed pursuant to your ordinance, which is shall. It's not may. It's the word reads it shall be required if a different zoning classification other than default classification of SF is submitted. I'm confused tonight. If you took action tonight, even though I suggested you not, but respectfully you did, took action tonight on the LEAP district zoning classification, why are we here with the petitioner asking for an industrial classification? Why don't they wait till you adopt your LEAP classification and put them in the LEAP classification? It makes no sense to ask for an industrial classification. Quite frankly, the general public, with all due respect to my colleague, Mr. Franson, the general public does not believe that the state is acting necessarily in their best interest. We had a process that was started. This has now been moved up because of the state's desire to move it up to have an industrial classification on that site. But if you're moving towards the LEAP classification, why would we recommend an industrial classification when you've got the LEAP classification on the doorstep? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And quite frankly, the general public does not believe that the state will play nice and come back in and seek a rezoning to the LEAP application. And there's no legal requirement that you could foist it upon them. None whatsoever. They would have to do it voluntarily, and they could challenge that. And at this point, we're concerned because as of 3.5 weeks ago, they had not been cooperating with Deb, with Cynthia Bowen, and attending meetings. Most of this has been done by Mr. Bontrager and Ms. Bowen in putting this information together, and the state has been noticeably absent. In addition to that, they had promised the commissioners they were going to pay money to help fund this study, and as of 3 weeks ago, maybe that's changed, they have paid nothing, nor made no commitment to pay any money. So this is being foisted on the back of the taxpayers of the county and participation with the city, and we welcome that and believe that that's appropriate, and thank them for that, and thank you for that. But the state has contributed nothing as of 3 weeks ago, is what we've been informed. So we don't believe that somehow or another they're going to come back in later and say, oh, we've got this industrial classification, now we want to come back in and do the leap. Regardless of what they say, now's the time to do this. Now's the time to create the district and let them apply and let them ask for a recommendation under the LEAP district.
Mr. Andreoli, you have
Thank you.
30 seconds if you
I'm out
want
of
to
time.
finish.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So my name is Jim Love, and I'm still at 3150 North US 52 like I was a few minutes ago.
So here, get this plugged in.
Okay, so I prepared some information for you folks. It was passed out earlier. What I want to speak to is I want to speak to the current industry that takes place in the LEAP district, which is agriculture. And you guys have an opportunity, as Mr. Franson said, to make some decisions on this. And you guys as a board have the first opportunity to act on behalf of the citizens of Boone County and the people who are doing business in the LEAP district currently. So I'd like to share with you a few pieces of information about agriculture because it's an often grossly misunderstood business. And if you look at the piece that's before us right now, you'll notice that the darkest color on the map shows the areas that have the highest percentage of corn growth. So that would be Iowa, followed by Illinois, followed by Indiana, and then followed by Nebraska. Now, the interesting thing about those states is the first three are able to produce maximum yields and feed the most amount of people with zero irrigation. So those three, Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa, do not put a tax on the water table, do not put a tax on the diesel fuel that pumps water, nor the electricity that pumps water, and feeds the greatest number of folks within the Corn Belt. As we move on to the next chart that we'll show you, I'd like to share with you the productivity, because oftentimes people say, well, you live in Indiana. That's a substandard place to grow corn. If you'll notice, the dark green areas within this map is the areas that show the greatest level of productivity. And you will notice that central Indiana, and where we're standing this evening, is among the areas of the United States, not just the state of Indiana, the United States, that is one of the highest levels of productivity anywhere in the United States. It is the same and very similar to that of Iowa, Illinois, two of the places that people fight over and would love to farm. If you remember the Field of Dreams, am I in heaven? No, son, you're in Iowa. And so a lot of people still believe that in the ag business, that is one of the ideal places. As you move on to Nebraska, you can get those yields, and that's why you'll see that kind of, those heat map areas in Nebraska, but that's all done under irrigation, because if you've been to Nebraska, you'll know that it's a very dry, arid climate, and without water, you don't get corn. So when people say, well, farmers can just move up the road and buy some other land, that's just not the case, even within the state of Indiana, and this map demonstrates that as well. Some of the things that I would like to also show you is the destruction of farm ground. 10% of the Earth's farm ground that's arable is in the United States. 17% of that land is considered ideal for farming, and 62% of the growth in industrial buildings in the last year took place on ideal farmland. So that should actually make some food for thought when you think about the fact that we're destroying farmland that quickly. U.S. agriculture adds over $1 trillion to the U.S. economy. $1 trillion. That's numbers that the government kicks around, but we as locals don't oftentimes think in those numbers. As we look at what it does in the Indiana economy, it adds almost 200,000 jobs. It adds $14.9 billion, which is almost 5% of the GDP of the state of Indiana. And that is sourced from the Kelley School of Business, which is, I believe, IU, and I'm kind of a Purdue guy myself. But anyway, we see that we've got a lot of good numbers here as far as what's being done here in Indiana, and it's being done with agriculture. 1.3 million acres of ground was lost in the United States last year. That's 148 acres an hour. That takes 70 days to use up a county in Indiana. Based on the average size of a county, Every 70 days, we burn up in Indiana County. So that means at this current rate of burning up farm ground, as the IEDC would like to do to create their utopian business park, at this current rate, what we will have is we will burn up 5 counties a year. 5 counties, Indiana counties, same equivalent land mass will get burned up every year to build these utopian industrial
Sorry, your
parks.
time is up.
The world population is 9.3 billion people by 2050. Farmers will have 36 million fewer acres to grow that food on. If this doesn't scare you, it should. It scares the hell out of me, and I'm in the business.
Thank you.
Good evening. Brian Daggy, 2005 West 250 North, Lebanon. I'm appearing here tonight on the behalf of the Boone County Farm Bureau Board of Directors. I'm president of the board and speaking to represent agricultural interests in Boone County, particularly since we feel like maybe we've not been fully involved in some of these processes. After careful study, the following are key points we're concerned with, and I have some copies of this I'll share with you after I'm done. All of these points, we believe, point to the fact that the process you're voting on tonight, the zoning determination, needs to be delayed. One of our first points is we're concerned with the loss of prime farmland. We believe in protecting farmland, and while understanding development may happen, we are for smart, responsible, and economically viable development. The proposed Phase 2 LEAP project and its blanket zoning designations do not meet these parameters in our estimation. We support the continued development of the PUD project, which has been one that's been ongoing, and we were promised that it was going to be completed before any more annexation talk would happen. Yet here we are tonight. The inappropriate zoning that we are to be discussing on a rapid basis like this really should not be done until the PUD's in place. And we are somewhat disappointed, no, I'm not going to say somewhat, we are disappointed that Farm Bureau and Ag Interest were not invited to participate in the so-called LEAP development and the zoning that was discussed tonight. With the development of the PUD has been proposed in the past, Farm Bureau believes that the PUD should move towards adoption. The county must use the money invested in the PUD as the first step in investing and updating the entire comprehensive plan for Boone County with everything we see coming down the road. The potential impacts of the LEAP projects and ongoing development within the county indicates the county comprehensive plan is outdated and needs updating. In addition, Lebanon and Boone County need to provide financing for our planning updates to make sure it's done properly. It's in all of our best interest. Farm Bureau wants to represent agriculture during any comprehensive plan update. The proposed rapid adoption of the Phase 2 LEAP annexation of the 5,225 acres is occurring less than 6 months after the Phase 1 adoption of nearly 1,400 acres. Too many questions remain unanswered. First and foremost, where will the water come from? Who will pay for it? Pat answers that will be the IEDC and end users are insufficient, both in details and protections for the community. What other services might be required? We need some of those answers before zoning and annexation moves forward. Another reason that we think this Phase 2 annexation needs to slow down. We want to see transparency increase. We recognize that business development is a complicated endeavor, but that doesn't excuse the major lack of details. Possible services need another pertinent details. And while we saw some of these tonight, presented at a time where you're being asked to vote on them, I find that wholly inappropriate in terms of having public input and the chance for the public to respond and for the people you are responsible to. Farmers, landowners, and residents within the area, within the county, deserve to hear sufficient details in sufficient time to allow them to plan their own future. I'll note in the Lebanon Reporter of November 19th, Ben Bontrager, the Lebanon Plan Director, noted the city is scurrying to get the proper classification in place before annexation occurs. We didn't realize that was going to be presented to you tonight, but it's still one more indication this annexation needs to slow down, because if you're having to move this rapidly to try to get things lined up, it increases the likelihood of missing something very important down the road. Farm Bureau as an organization believes that zoning needs to recognize farmland as a natural resource and should have protections for farmland preservation in the planning process.
Okay, sir, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Farm Bureau appreciates the opportunity to speak tonight.
Good evening. My name's Glenn Beasy. I live at 71 South, 200 West, just outside of the city limits of Lebanon. And that area is subject to this super voluntary annexation, which to me is wordplay. So what you're saying to me on that map that disappeared is that anybody in that area that doesn't want to be annexed is not going to get annexed. I saw some pretty pictures up there, some nice urban activities. But I can tell you what, I've lived in Boone County. In 2 days, I'll be living in this county for 54 years. Those types of activities aren't my types of activities. I'm a hunter, I'm a fisherman, and I like to shoot my guns. You're telling me that if we keep our plot of ground, that we don't annex it, that I'm still going to be able to shoot my gun on my property when everybody else around me gets annexed to city? I don't think so. In the city, you can't discharge a BB gun or even use a bow and arrow because it's against ordinance. But you're telling me I'm still going to be able to carry on the things that I like to do on the property that I live on, that we pay taxes for. We moved out of the city limits to enjoy those types of things. And I understand growth happens, and I understand we're along the pipeline, we're on 65 and all. But to stand here and tell me that you're going to annex people that only want to be annexed, and those people that don't want to be annexed are going to be left as county, that they'll still be able to carry on their activities that is allowed in the county but not allowed in the city. And I don't believe that. Thank you.
Good evening, my name's Kim Love. I live at 3150 North State Road 52. I looked on your website and it says the purpose of the zoning committee is to regulate the use of the land with the jurisdiction, within the jurisdiction of the city of Lebanon. So that seems pretty straightforward, but the state hasn't shown you any plans or end users for this land, so how can you really appropriately zone the land in question? How could you know if the structures comply with the city's current zoning regulations? Who is going to pay for the enlargement to our city's infrastructure? Is the IEDC going to pay the bill? If so, do we have a signed and legally binding contract that states such? I don't think the citizens of Lebanon want to cover that bill. We all understand some growth is inevitable, but we never could have conceived that our own state would come in and carpet bomb our county and take thousands of acres to do with as they please, with no input from us citizens or even you zoning boards. I think currently there are approximately 8 steps to the industrial zoning. Why do we have all these rules if we're not going to follow them? Why should the state receive special accommodations the citizens of Boone County who have owned land and paid taxes for several generations can't receive? The land should remain zoned as it currently is, agricultural or residential, until an end user is established, and then the appropriate zoning may be applied. We need this land to feed our people now and into the future. We all grew up with parents that encouraged us to save for a rainy day. If we ran out of land to feed our own population, it won't just rain. It'll be the worst storm you could ever imagine. Is that the legacy that you want to leave for your children and grandchildren? Tell the state no to this blanket zoning idea. Tell them that each end user may apply for their own zoning requirements just like everyone else. I know I asked a lot of questions tonight and I don't think you'll have the answers for me. But please think on these questions and decide the best answer for our community. And a 255-foot building does not belong in the cornfields of Boone County. I do not understand the idea of allowing that to happen. If they can build a 255-foot building, why can't they build 3 100-foot buildings in a grouping instead? Please don't allow that height of building.
Hi, Carrie Douglas again. So I had a different presentation set up, but I just wanted to reflect on a few things that have happened tonight. Number one, this room is full of amazing people. Our community here, incredible. I just saw an accident and not one person drove past that. These people stopped and we ran to that car that was smoking. We have a great system here. We need to follow it. We had a presentation earlier for 5 acres to have a zoning change, and we saw a detailed concept map. We met the end user, we heard about his family, we heard about his company's reputation. You guys still had questions, as you should, and you asked them and you got the answers. For a 5-acre rezone, you're being asked tonight to rezone 5,200 acres with concept maps that say right on them subject to change. We've also seen a very good way that those standards that they talk about can be manipulated. I didn't come up here and talk to you about EV battery manufacturing. I talked to you about EV battery storage, because that's a part of EV manufacturing factories. They have to store the batteries there. But because battery manufacturing is not allowed, that's what they got you to focus on. That's not even the part I was talking about. That's how these standards, these distractions with zoning and buffering need to be specified. They need the time to have questions answered, just in what we've seen tonight. 5 acres, rezoning, you got a detailed plan, you met the end user, you got your questions answered, and you made your decision. That's all we're asking for tonight. This general industrial zoning, use the default, standard single family. Use that, and then when the IEDC is ready to reveal their end users, then they can get the zoning they need. And you guys can make an informed decision for all the wonderful people in this community. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Peggy Daggy, and I live at 2005 West, 250 North, Lebanon, Indiana. I'm going to address something that nobody wants to talk about. I'd like to address the water situation. One solution proposed to supply water for the LEAP project has been to bring water down from the Wabash in Tippecanoe County, Lafayette. It's estimated to cost $1 to $2 billion of taxpayer money with no real plan in place. The displacement of in-place drainage, changes in the environment, the 3 to 5 year build-out, just to name a few, have not been addressed. Nor has the total amount of water been determined, but studies are being done. How can you develop a project with no clear picture of where it will get water? Loring Nyes, professor of environmental and ecological engineering at Purdue University, says, how can you do a study if you don't know how much water you want to take out? We don't have a good picture of the level of which we are already using water resources. If you don't have a good grasp of that, it's easy to keep thinking you can expand economic development as if water is infinitely available, when in fact it is not. The big question that needs to be explored is how taking water from the Wabash will affect the Wabash. We are concerned that the speed at which this project is being implemented is going to cause many problems in the future. On October 24th, at the City Council meeting, an MOU between the IEDC and Lebanon Utilities to pre-reserve water for the Lilly project was proposed and voted upon by the council. In Jeff Jacobs' presentation, he repeatedly referred to the need for MGDs of water, million gallons per day. At one point, he indicated 864,000 million gallons of water per day to be pre-reserved, and another mention was 864 million gallons per day. This presentation was given a unanimous vote by the City Council. 864 million gallons of water per day is not possible, let alone 864,000 million gallons of water per day. The concern here is the city officials are pushing this project through so fast, they don't even know what they're voting on. The minutes reflect 864,000 gallons per day. But the proposal given and voted on was million gallons per day, as is evidenced in the online YouTube recording of the meeting. When these costs and unanswered questions, with these costs and unanswered questions, the Boone County Preservation Group believes the zoning consideration should be tabled. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Smith. I'm a resident of Lebanon. Water and sewage treatment are important factors that at some point the state is going to have to solve with new plants to deal with. So I have a question. Does the LEAP classification include or exclude water treatment plants and sewage treatment plants? And if it doesn't, how are we going to plan for those? So perhaps get an answer to that before the close of the evening. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jeff Newman. Currently reside here in town at 218 North Park, but own a residence that we're remodeling at 195 North, 200 West. Looks like we might be a feeder road here soon, I don't know. I wrote down a whole bunch of questions or comments, so I'm just going to run through these because I don't have 3 minutes. I got like 30 minutes of what on earth is going on. First thing I really wanted to ask earlier, but had to step out. All these spots that are going to remain in the county, but the county is going to adopt the same zoning as a county landowner. I haven't heard about that. So I'm curious how that plays into what this overlay is going to look like, and then what these regulations are going to look like as far as, you know, is it a 125-foot setback? Is it a 1,500-foot setback? When I've got outside my yard, the potential from here to the courthouse, I can have a 200-foot plus building. The potential, you'll know this one, Mr. Campbell, just right down here at the old Stokes, that can be another 200-foot building. Okay, those are 0.3 miles. That's 1,800 feet. Suddenly, I've got 200-foot buildings all around me. So that's something that I think is a concern that maybe is being passed over. Solar was mentioned. Okay, no solar farms. You saw the nice, pretty build-up picture. What was on the top of that pretty build-up picture of all the manufacturing? It was nice and silver. It was, you know, solar farms or solar power is being encouraged by our federal government. So is wind. Okay, so when all these manufacturing places or all these companies put it on their parking garages, put it on the top of their roofs, it's solar farms. By the time you put 4, 5, or 6 of them, now you've got hundreds of acres of solar panels, or even worse, I'll go ahead and say it even though I hate to, anybody who's following small modular reactors, those are 5 to 10 years out. They take a few acres to have something the size that powers a submarine or that's powering our aircraft carriers. That's encouraged. That's clean, renewable energy that our federal government is encouraging. They're also saying those can be built wherever you want them to power your manufacturing plant. Is that something that can definitely be excluded? Should it be? It's west. It's all upwind from the town. So keep that in mind. Residential, 400-foot setbacks, etc. Again, my house butts up against it. Right now, we're not purple. There's about 16, 17 houses there along 200 West and 32. They're not purple, even though we've got the industrial park, and then we've got the new proposed area for manufacturing. Those haven't been addressed. There's houses out on Dead End Road. Those aren't purple. So how many residents actually weren't purple on there that actually are? We're in the middle of it. City block, kind of went through that. City block is normally about 300 feet. So a city block from here You can have a 75-foot tall building or whatever it was, and then for every city block after that, you know, it can be another 50 feet tall, or do the math, divide, I guess, 60 feet tall. Landscape requirements, all of you with zoning appeals board, landscape requirements and the parking lots, et cetera, having landscaping in the middle of the parking lot, that's a joke. That's the most common zoning appeal that's approved. Trucks don't like them. Some of the parking lots are too small. So constantly, any of the landscape in the parking lot, at the edge of the parking lot, the curbs, the sidewalks, that's one of the first things in the industrial park. That, no, you don't have to do that, and that's common, so we'll just go ahead and blanket approve those. Waterford, what's it look like now? The concept map was put up.
Your time is up, please.
Okay, like I said, there's 30 minutes of
All right.
what's going on,
Thank you.
not 3.
Anyone else like to come forward? Okay.
Hi, my name's Melissa Lamerson. I live at 2575 North, 350 West, or on the curve of 250 and 350, and I appreciate listening to my neighbors tonight. I really don't have a prepared statement. In fact, I'm a little embarrassed because of how well prepared my neighbors are with the facts and figures. I have no statistics. I'm one of those little plots that's a carve-out tentatively based on tonight and future meetings. I have more concerns now than I even did walking in the door after hearing my well-prepared neighbors talk about the impact of farming land, the impact of water. I think about we're on well, we're on septic, and if there's a zoning around me, how does that impact my county parcel and my well, my water table? What will I be required to do to live county surrounded by city, by single family dwellings? What does that really mean? And is there a future for whatever is SF today or tomorrow? When does it become a PUD and some other zoning that I haven't even considered? I appreciate the call out, maybe just keeping the zoning the same, agricultural and residential as it is today. That is the purpose that we live where we live. I heard the states talk about the live, work, play concept. That's my home. I live there. I work there. Both my husband and I work out of our home, and we play there. That's the beauty of where we live, and I'd like to preserve that. And I realize you have a weighty choice on your hand, a weighty decision, and it's not easily done. I appreciate the call out to slow down and really think about the impact to our county, to our community, to the city, and all of our residents, city and county. So thank you to my neighbors who came so well prepared to offer statements and very thoughtful comments, and thank you for listening to me.
Anyone else like to come forward? Not seeing anyone coming forward, I'll close the public hearing. Now, at this time, Ben and the ones from the state, you're going to come to answer some of the questions you have that these people have asked, so they're going to try to come up with the answers for you, okay?
I'm happy with Mr. Fullbeck's help to try to answer your questions. I don't think there's any way I can answer all the questions that were presented by the folks here tonight. Some of the answers simply don't exist. It's premature. Water issue is going to have to be sorted out. If there's inadequate water, there won't be any big buildings out there. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's processes to be followed. Delay is not going to either address or solve many of the concerns that were expressed tonight. Those same concerns are going to be here next month, and the month after, and the month after. There's a lot of development plan, review, detailed information that's going to have to be presented. Even if the zoning is in place, there'll be a lot of public hearings, detailed information provided, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for input. It's not going to solve those who are supporters and families who've spent their life in agriculture. I get that. But there's a lot of facets to life in Boone County. We have 70,000 people live in this county. And agriculture is important, but it's by no means a majority of the people who live here and work here. We're trying to be transparent. We're under some pressure. We're under some confidentiality requirements that I'm told are very strict. And we're simply not able to provide as much information as I would like to have. In a normal situation, as a lawyer representing an applicant, I present the kind of drawings that were presented for that 5-acre site. We simply don't have that yet, and for a project of this size, we simply can't do it yet. But Mr. Fullbeck is here. I appreciate the comments that have been made, and I'm happy to try to answer your questions.
I think I have a couple for Ben, if
Sure.
anyone.
Yep.
I have one. Who is it that's setting this timeline right now?
Excuse me?
Who's setting this deadline? Is it the IEDC that wants this set now?
Yeah, this is in reaction to what we are hearing from an economic development perspective. We are trying to be responsive to companies that have shown interest in the LEAP district. What we are asking for is the proper zoning so that we can have further conversations with those companies to develop, for them to have development plans that they would then come back and have the detail that some of the comments related to today that will be provided. Until that zoning is proper and the development plans can be brought forth, it's hard to, again, as Kent alluded to, answer some of those questions specifically. Relative to the utilities, I do want to address that one specifically. There has been a plan that has been in process with Citizens Energy and the Lebanon utilities to bring additional capacity. We are continuing to have those conversations and foster those conversations between those two entities. There is progress being made, and we can share further details on that in the future. Relative to the pipeline that was referenced from Tippecanoe County, that is a long-term central Indiana water solution. That is not a LEAP development solution. This is something that has been studied for multiple decades as a possible solution for central Indiana and the water sustainability long-term. Again, those plans and processes are in place, but as Kent alluded to, if the water is not available, the companies will not be locating there.
So what you're telling me is there's multiple corporations they won't give an answer until we've set our zoning in place and it's been annexed.
And so what we are asking is for the proper zoning and annexation so we can continue conversations with potential companies that would be interested in locating here to further develop their development plans that they will then present to you.
I understand where your timeline, I understand where you're coming from, okay. It's standard process, I understand it, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Not for him.
Okay, Ben?
Maybe just address a couple other questions that were raised. There was some discussion about LEAP district zoning versus ID zoning. I know the applicant spent a little time talking about the ID zoning district. When they first filed their petition for this annexation, the ID zoning district was the only thing available to them. So that's what they filed. Since that time, we have developed the LEAP zoning district. It was the first the item previous to this. So we have recommended the LEAP zoning district rather than the ID zoning district for that area south of the Big Four Trail. So just wanted to clarify our recommendation for everything Big Four Trail and south. What our recommendation would be is to recommend the LEAP zoning district, and then north of the trail would be the SF, single-family residential zoning district. That's our recommendation. Their petition request was something different than that at the time they filed, but that's based on the information current as of tonight. We're recommending that LEAP zoning district for the area south of the trail. A couple other questions that came up about city-county jurisdiction. If they're in one of those holes that you saw on the map that were within the annexation area, if they choose not to be annexed, they're within the county's jurisdiction. We have no legal authority to apply city standards to those properties. We can't. That would be illegal for us to do that. We have no jurisdiction on those properties. We can only apply city regulations to properties that are within the city zoning jurisdiction. We cannot apply those outside our boundaries. That's a hard boundary. So just want to maybe just clarify that. There was a question about who's going to pay for the increases, like the expansion of roads and utilities. Certainly, the state is looking at financial opportunities to be able to look at some of those large utility discussions like the water, wastewater, electric, et cetera. I will also point out the city has also implemented impact fees on new development. Both road and park impact fees, depending on what type of user it is. So if an innovation manufacturing facility comes in and they generate a certain number of trips based on the type of use it is, they will pay a fee per trip per day for that development. Some of these uses could pay millions of dollars in road impact fees, so that would offset some of the costs, some of the burden that their users and traffic will generate on the roads. So that's another layer to this that the city has as those users come in. They would pay those fees. That would help us offset the expansions that are necessary to those roads. And certainly on the residential side, those additional residents are going to have needs from the recreation side. So we do have a park impact fee to apply to residential uses that help us, again, offset some of the needs in terms of the services and amenities to be provided there. There was a question that came up about utility facilities. I'll go back to the discussion we had on the LEAP zoning district. All utility facilities like treatment plants, well fields, et cetera, as necessary, they're all conditional uses, so they are permitted, and we would just review the specific requirements as part of their submittal to make sure they meet all potential conditions we might want to apply to those uses, but they are contemplated in terms of the zoning district to allow for what utility needs might be necessary. We very much are aware that there's going to be a treatment plant out here somewhere. So we have accommodated that in the zoning. I think that generally covers what I think I'm able to cover in terms of questions about processes. Maybe just to draw a comparison of, again, Dan, with your questions about, when to apply the zoning versus the end user. You're correct. It's very typical that the zoning is applied to a development up front. So that developer, quote-unquote developer, can then develop the plans for utilities, infrastructure, and market the sites to end users. For example, like Lebanon Business Park, when it came in back in, I think, 1989 or 1990, the zoning was put in place first at a time when Duke did not know who the users were going to be, but the zoning establishes the uses that are permitted, and that's why we made sure in that LEAP zoning district be very specific about uses that were permitted and could potentially be permitted to make sure that those are the only uses that would be permitted there. So that's really the process in terms of establishing zoning, allowing the developer then to go out and spend the significant amount of money to develop some of those additional utility discussions, et cetera, market the sites to end users. When those end users commit to the site, then those additional details are developed for the development plan, architecture, landscaping, et cetera. So that's really procedurally how that typically happens. And essentially every kind of development that comes to the city, that the zoning request is first. Usually before they even close on the land, there's a due diligence period where they go through and they look at things like zoning to make sure zoning's in place. So if somebody were to get under contract to purchase 200 acres and they want to put a certain type of use there, they'll have a period of time before they have to close before they can make sure that the zoning is correct. It's the same thing with one of these leads that's coming here. They're going to want to make sure the zoning's in place before they make a commitment, because that's a significant risk for them to commit and start spending money to design a site without knowing if the zoning's in place. So that's why the zoning comes first, and it's just incumbent upon us to make sure that the standards are appropriate to that zoning district to make sure we get what we're anticipating. So I think that covers what I think I can cover, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't ask this next part. So, like I say, I noticed this on I know we're on a unique project here, so, but on the bottom of the staff report, in the planning recommendations, or the planned actions, I've never seen this at the end. It says that if the LP zoning district isn't adopted prior to consideration for the council of the annexation, then the general industrial zoning classification with use restrictions should be applied to the annexation area south of the trail. So if this doesn't pass tonight, I'm interpreting it this way, I may be wrong, but if this doesn't pass tonight, are you still going to take it to the city council under the general, general industrial?
If what doesn't pass tonight?
If what we say here is, we don't want this zone, the docket right here to pass tonight. If we say, we're not going to recommend this to the council.
So you have the ability to recommend any zoning districts you want, up to and including the LEAP zoning district.
And then you're saying the planning.
So what I suggested there is there's still a process that the LEAP zoning district has to go through to be adopted by the council.
Okay.
And so the council will have to adopt that before it can be applied to the annexation area.
Okay.
If for some reason the council decides not to adopt the LEAP zoning district text amendments, then it'd be incumbent actually on the council to determine an appropriate replacement zoning for that. So that would be the process that I would go through in the next 2 meetings with the council. So the recommendation tonight from the Plan Commission be what you feel is the appropriate zoning district for this annexation territory. And then that would go forward to the council, assuming the schedule occurs the way it's proposed, the LEAP zoning district could be considered. Now, absent that, it'll be up to the council to determine what the applicable is.
So us as the commission, we've already approved the LEAP.
So you've recommended it to the council.
Right.
So theoretically, you could then recommend that zoning district as part of this annexation.
But if we don't.
You could recommend whatever zoning district you want.
But if we don't recommend this one tonight, what does it fall to?
Have to recommend.
We have to.
If you don't recommend, you have to recommend a zoning district tonight.
Right.
You could recommend LEAP, you could recommend SF, you could recommend any one of our other zoning districts.
And what if we tabled it?
Then it'll be tabled to the next meeting.
Okay. All right.
At some point, there will need to be a recommendation from the Plan Commission on a zoning
we're in a
district.
complicated, unique situation. I'm just trying to get clarification.
That's what he just asked and what I just said they could. So yeah, you either need to make a recommendation on a zoning district or you could table it for further consideration. But at some point, we'll need a recommendation from you for a zoning district.
Thank you.
So I just have a couple. First, just to bring extra clarity, so water, wastewater treatment plants, police, fire facilities, if necessary, yes.
They're either permitted or conditional, yes.
Correct, okay. Private air hangars, are they permitted?
They are not.
Oh, okay, just checking. I didn't know if it was like an ag company that had a private air hangar, if that was prohibited or not.
That would be something right now, it is not permitted. That would have to come to us for special consideration if somebody wanted to do something like that. So right now, they are not permitted.
Even if it's in the ag industry?
In the ag district?
Industry.
Oh, industry? No, it is not permitted.
Okay. Thank you.
Then maybe I ask you to elaborate. I know there's a lot of nuance to this question, but the question was asked, if I don't get annexed, what happens? And you addressed that would remain under county zoning jurisdiction, that the city would have no legal authority of any kind over that piece of property. I think there was another part to the gentleman's question. Well, what if the county what if the county rezones that property, which they have the legal right to rezone any piece of property in the county. Then you may create a legal non-conforming use. I know that's a big topic, but do you want to maybe address?
You open that can of worms?
Yes.
Well, so the county is working on a set of zoning standards for a LEAP zoning district as well. And I know so the city's LEAP zoning district is going to be slightly different than the county's because they have to consider some of those things like you just talked about. There are existing residents, there are existing ag uses, there are other uses out there that have to be accommodated. I know they talked about that at their last Plan Commission meeting. So they will have some nuances a little different than ours because ours are all properties that are under contract that will be in the LEAP zoning district that are part of this annexation. So the county's zoning ordinance changes will be slightly different and will accommodate those things. And I certainly, if they have some questions about that, they'll want to reach out to county commissioners and to their consultant just to understand what those differences might be. But again, I don't know that they're intending to create any non-conforming uses in the creation. Even under a rezone, they're still allowing residential agricultural uses, is my understanding. So those are some of the differences between our LEAP zoning district that was just considered a moment ago and what the county is going to adopt for anything that remains in the county. They will have some different components to that accommodate what's already occurring out there.
But just to, I guess, say it for the group, a legal non-conforming use doesn't mean you have to stop that use.
Correct.
That use is a legal use. It is legal to use your property within the laws, even though the zoning would allow a different use.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, a change in zoning does not mean that you have to cease what you're doing on the property now. That can remain. But I do know the county is also considering the uses that are already out in that area as part of their zoning ordinance to make sure that they accommodate those.
Any other questions by the board? Okay, I would entertain a motion that Ben has talked out. Do you want me to read that? Can you read that again, Ben?
Well, no, I mean, the staff recommendation was to recommend the LEAP zoning district for the area and the annexation territory south of the Big Four Trail and the SF single-family classification north of the trail. That's our recommendation. You can choose to follow that recommendation or make another recommendation or table it for further consideration. I'd rather table it for.
I'll move that we forward this to the council based on the recommendation of staff, which is LEAP zoning district south of the Big Four Trail, single-family SF north of the Big Four Trail.
Kevin, just to clarify, the trail would be included in the SF?
Yes, the
Yes.
trail is included.
Yes.
Okay, he made a motion. I'll second.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
John Lastly?
No.
Dan Bayshore?
No.
Yes.
Corey Coons?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
Yes.
Ashley Paddock?
No.
Brian Tandy?
Yes.
Ally Mullen?
No.
Lori Gross?
Yes.
You tied?
So if I counted correctly, it passed 5-4.
Right, 5-4.
We might have. There was only 4 of us that said no.
Okay. Any other business that we have? Not knowing any. I will say the next meeting is on December the 19th for the Plan Commission, and I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion we adjourn?
I'll second.
They all in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Choose no.
First time.